This is Nick Melionis, and you're watching the Move Faces Tech Buzz segment. I'm here with Mark Suster. We're at the Startup Grind Conference. And Mark, would you mind introducing yourself and giving us a little bit of a background in terms of what you've done?
So, name's Mark Suster. I started 2 software companies. I started my career actually as a software developer, so I had technical skills. In '99, I decided to launch my own company. I built it in Europe, and I ran it for 6 years. We sold it to a publicly traded company. I started my second company in Silicon Valley. I sold that to Salesforce.com. I became VP of Products at Salesforce. Did that for a small period of time, and in 2007 became a venture capitalist with GRP Partners.
Good stuff right there. So one thing you've talked about quite a bit today is the importance of building a strong team right from the get-go. And so you've been through the process twice now, and also you've seen a myriad of teams across the gamut as well. Yeah. Would you mind describing what your first 2 teams were like?
Well, I would say in my first company I made every mistake, so maybe I'll just talk about my mistakes. Number one is I hired way too many people like myself. So I hired people who came from very expensive consulting jobs and were at roughly the same stage in the career. They didn't have startup experience, and they were pretty extroverted like me, and I feel companies need to build people with diverse teams and diverse sets of skills. And I think when you start, it also really helps to get people who can come in low cost and not be expensive and not have a family to feed. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be like that, but you really need to think in the early stages about who composes the right DNA. Number 2 is you need very technical resources in a startup these days, and too many people load up their teams with business people because many startup founders are business oriented, and so they hire people like themselves where what they really need is 5 developers. So I like to say the ideal startup team is a CEO, 4 or 5 engineers, designers, and nobody else.
Absolutely. And so you said yourself were a software engineer too, correct?
Yeah.
That's great right there. And so going forward now, obviously you said you're in the VC side of things. Yeah. What's the most, I guess, different thing or something you've learned entirely new about the tech space since transitioning from entrepreneur to now being an entrepreneur but in the VC space?
Well, I think it's hard to be an investor. I think people think it's easy, you just write checks, but really what I said, the job of a CEO in a company that's growing, I call it chief psychologist, because if you're great at recruiting and leading teams, you hire a VP of marketing, a VP of technology, a VP of sales, VP of biz dev, whatever. You hire these people who then in turn run 8-10 people each. And your job is not to do everything. Your job is to coach and mentor. And what ends up happening when you hire really talented people is they fight. They fight over turf, they fight over different directions, and so you become a psychologist. It's how do I motivate these people, get them to work together so that the whole team is buzzing, and I feel like the job of a VC is very similar. You're working with teams trying to get the most performance. It's almost like being a coach on a basketball team. How do you get peak performance out of your team members?
That's great there. So outside of tech, what are your hobbies?
Really into film. I'm based in Los Angeles, but that's just a coincidence. I'm passionate about film and the usual stuff, travel, sports, whatever. I have 2 little kids. I have Jacob, who's almost 10, and Andy, who's 7. And when you have kids that age, your hobby becomes your kids.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great plan right there. Yeah. Well, Mark, appreciate it again. And this is Nick with Move Faces TV's Tech Buzz segment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark.